Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Faith here. So today we are going to be reading John 5 and maybe John 6. This is the third sign of Jesus' miracles, and that he is healing the sick. After this, a Jewish festival took place, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. By the sheep gate in Jerusalem, there's a pool called Bethesda, and in Hebrew, which has 5 colonnades. Within these lay a large number of the sick, blind, lame, and paralyzed, waiting for the moving of the water, because an angel would go down into the pool from time to time and stir up the water. Then the first one who got in the water after water was stirred up recovered from whatever ailment they had. So right there, that was like a belief the people, like the sick and the blind and the paralyzed, that was the belief they believed in. One man was there who had been sick for 38 years, and when Jesus saw him lying there, he knew he had already been there a long time. He said to him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the sick man answered, "I don't have a man to put me into the pool when water is stirred, but while I'm coming, someone goes down ahead of me." "Get up," Jesus told him. "Pick up your mat and walk." Instantly the man got well, picked up his mat, and started to walk. Now that day was Sabbath, so the Jews said to the man who had became healed, "This is the Sabbath. It is illegal for you to pick up your mat." He replied, "The man who made me well told me, pick up your mat and walk." "Who is the man who told you to pick up your mat and walk?" they asked. But the man who was cured did not know who it was, because Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. After this, Jesus found him in the temple complex and said to him, "See, you are well. Do not sin anymore, so that something worse doesn't happen to you." The man went and reported to the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. Okay, so I have some notes. So Jesus healed the guy's legs, but also he healed his heart. And this part teaches us that a relationship with Jesus is the most valuable thing. And then Jesus, and in verse 14, it says, "Do not sin anymore, so that something worse doesn't happen to you." Jesus is telling this not as a threat, but as reassurance. Therefore, the Jews began persecuting Jesus because he was doing these things on the Sabbath. But Jesus responded to them, "My Father is still working, and I am working also." This is why the Jews began trying all the more to kill him. Not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he was even calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. Then Jesus replied, "I assure you, the Son is not able to do anything on his own, but only what he sees the Father doing. For whatever the Father does, the Son also does these things in the same way. For the Father loves the Son and shows him everything he is doing, and he will show him greater works than these, so that you will be amazed. And just as the Father raises the dead and gives them life, so the Son also gives life to anyone he wants to. The Father, in fact, judges no one, but has given all the judgment to the Son, so that all the people will honor the Son just as they honor the Father. And anyone who does not honor the Son does not honor the Father who sent him. So in verses 19 through 22, it is talking about the Holy Trinity. And the best way I can explain the Holy Trinity, I heard this from a friend. The Holy Trinity is kind of like the 3 types of matter. They all are 3 different things, but so it's kind of like an ice cube. An ice cube can be water, but it could be ice, or it could evaporate. It's kind of like that. That's the best I can explain it, because I'm still confused with it sometimes. Beside that point, Jesus gives us things that are unknown to us. God isn't just after our healing, He is after our hearts. Okay, the next part. I assure you, anyone who hears my word and believes Him who sent me has eternal life and will not come under judgment, but has passed from death to life. I assure you, an hour is coming, and now is here, when the dead will hear the voice of the Son of God, and those who hear will live. For just as the Father has life in Himself, so also He has granted to the Son to have life in Himself, and has granted Him the right to pass judgment, because He is the Son of Man. Do not be amazed at this, because a time is coming when all who in the graves will hear His voice and come out. Those who have done good things to the resurrection of life, but those who have done wicked things to the resurrection of judgment. I can do nothing on my own. I judge only as I hear. My judgment is righteous, because I do not seek my own will, but the will of Him who sent me. If I testify about myself, my testimony is not valid, and there is another one who testifies about me, and I know that the testimony he gives about me is valid. You have sent messengers to John, and he has testified to the truth. But I don't receive man's testimony, but I say these things so that you may be saved. John was burning and a shining lamp. For a time you were willing to enjoy the light. But I have a greater testimony than John's, because of the works that the Father has given me to accomplish. These very works I am doing testify about me, that the Father has sent me. The Father who has sent me had testified about me. You have not heard His voice at any time, and you haven't seen His form, but you don't have His word living in you, because you don't believe in the one He sent. You pore over the Scriptures because you think you have eternal life in them, yet they testify about me, and you're not willing to come to me so that you may have life. I do accept glory from men, but I don't know you, that you have no love for God within you. And I have come in my Father's name, yet you don't accept me. If someone else comes in His name, you will accept him. How can you believe? While accepting glory from one another, you don't seek the glory that comes from the only God. Do you think that I will accuse you to the Father? Your accuser is Moses, on whom you have set your hope. For if you believe Moses, you will believe me, because he wrote about me. But if you don't believe in his writings, how will you believe in my words? Okay, I have some more notes. In chapter 5, in the beginning, before, I should have said this earlier, but I really forgot about my notes in this book. Jesus goes to Bethsaida, and Bethsaida was like this magic pool the sick people thought could heal them. But this guy that is unhealed, he had been there for 38 years. And Jesus asked them if the guy wants to be healed. But the guy replies, I can't. And explains, but Jesus tells him to get up. So the guy does. But then the Jews throw a fit about it. And then the Jews were the leaders and were irritated. And the guy didn't know who healed him. But then Jesus finds the guy at the temple, and Jesus wasn't a local. But then Jesus tells him to stop sinning, and the guy tells Jewish leaders to stop sinning. Okay, now the thing we just read, the 4 witnesses to Jesus, which is chapter 5, 31 through 47, there was a verse by J.P. I don't know what the last name is, but I just remember the quote that I wrote down. Light shine not to be seen, but to show the way. And then I have one more note here. The Pharisees were missing the point, which was Jesus and the backstory behind the scriptures. So back then, the Pharisees only looked at the scriptures and read the scriptures, but they never went deep within them, if that makes sense. Okay, now we're going to be, chapter 6 is about the fourth sign, feeding the 500. Yeah. The fourth sign, feeding the 500. After the Jews crossing the Sea of Galilee, and a huge crowd was following him because he saw the signs that he was performing by healing the sick. So Jesus went up a mountain and sat down there with his disciples. And now that the Passover, a Jewish festival, was there, therefore, when Jesus looked up and noticed a huge crowd coming toward him, he asked Philip, "Where will we buy bread so the people could eat?" He asked this to test him, for he himself knew what he was going to do. Philip answered, 200 denarii worth of bread wouldn't be enough for each of them to have a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There's a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. What are they for so many?" Then Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." There was plenty of grass in the place, so they sat down. The men numbered about 5,000. Then Jesus took the loaves, and after giving thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. So also with the fish, as many as they wanted. And when they were full, he told the disciples to collect the leftovers so nothing is wasted. They collected them and filled the baskets with the pieces from the 5 barley loaves that were left over by those who had eaten. When the people saw the sign he had done, and they said, This really is the prophet who was to come in the world." Therefore, when Jesus knew that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, he withdrew again to the mountain by himself. In verse 7, a denarii is a year's of wages, and a barley is a type of wheat that they used for bread back then. Fifth sign, and that is Jesus walking on water. When evening came, his disciples went down to the sea, got in a boat, and started across the Sea of Capernaum. Darkness had already set in, but Jesus had not yet come to them. Then a high wind arose, and the sea began to churn. And after they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea, and he was coming near the boat. They were afraid, but said to them, "It is I, don't be afraid." Then they were willing to take him on board, and at once the boat was at the shore where they were heading. Okay, the next part, the bread of life, which is Jesus. The next day, the crowd that had stayed on the other side of the sea knew there had been only one boat, and they also knew that Jesus had not boarded the boat with his disciples, but that his disciples had gone off alone. Some boats from Tiberias came near the place where they ate the bread after the Lord gave thanks. And when the crowd saw that neither Jesus nor his disciples were there, they got into the boats and went to Capernaum, looking for Jesus. When they found him on the other side of the sea, they said to him, "Rabbi, when did you get here?" Jesus answered, "I assure you, you're looking for me not because you saw the signs, but because you ate the loaves and you were filled. Don't work for the food that perishes, but for the food that lasts for eternal life, which the Son of Man will give you, because God the Father has sent his seal of approval on him. "What can we do to perform the works of God?" they asked. Jesus replied, "This is the work of God, that you believe in the one he has sent. What sign then are you going to do so we may see and believe you?" They asked. "What are you going to perform? Our fathers ate the manna in the wilderness. Just as it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat." Jesus said to them, "I assure you, Moses didn't give you the bread from heaven, but my Father gives you the real bread from heaven. For the bread of God is the one who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world." Then they said, "Sir, give us the bread always." "I am the bread of life," Jesus told them. "No one who comes to me will ever be hungry, and no one who believes in me will ever be thirsty again. But as I told you, you've seen me, and yet you do not believe. Everyone that the Father gives me will come to me, and the one who comes to me I will never cast out. For I have come down from heaven, not to do my will, but the will of him who sent me. This is the will of him who sent me, that I should lose none of those he has given me, but should raise them up on the last day. For this is the will of my Father, that everyone who sees the Son and believes in him may have eternal life, and I will raise him up on the last day." Therefore, the Jews started complaining about him because he said, "I am the bread that came down from heaven." They were saying, "Isn't that Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How can he now say, 'I have come down from heaven'?" Jesus answered them, "Stop complaining among yourselves. No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws him, and I will raise him up on the last day. It is written in the prophets, and they will all be taught by God. Everyone who has listened to and learned from the Father comes to me. Not that another has seen the Father except the one who is from God. He has seen the Father. I assure you, anyone who believes has eternal life. I am the bread of life. Your fathers ate the manna in the wilderness, and they died. This is the bread that comes down from heaven, so that anyone may eat of it and not die. I am the living bread that came down from heaven, and anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. The bread that I will give for the life of the world is my flesh." And that the Jews argued among themselves, "How can this man give us his flesh to eat?" So Jesus said to him, "I assure you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you do not have life in yourself. Anyone who eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise him up on the last day, because my flesh is real food, and my blood is real drink. The one who eats my flesh and drinks my blood lives in me, and I am in him. Just as the living Father sent me, and I live because of the Father, so that the one who feeds on me will live because of me. This is the bread that came down from heaven. It is not like manna your fathers ate, and they died. The one who eats the bread will live forever." He said these things while teaching in the synagogue in Capernaum. Okay, and our last section for today is many disciples desert Jesus. Therefore, when many of his disciples heard this, they said, "This teacher is hard. Who can accept it?" Jesus, knowing in himself that his disciples were complaining about this, asked him, "Does this offend you? Then what if you were to observe the Son of Man ascending to where he was before? The Spirit is the one who gives life. The flesh doesn't help at all. The words that I have spoken to you are the Spirit and are life. But these are the some among you who don't believe." For Jesus knew from the beginning those who would not believe and the one who would betray him. He said, "This is why I told you that no one can come to me unless it is granted to him by the Father." From the moment many of his disciples turned back and no longer accompanied him. Therefore Jesus said to the 12, "You don't want to go away too, do you?" Simon Peter answered, "Lord, who will we go to? You have the words of eternal life. We have come to believe and know that you are the Holy One of God." Jesus replied to him, "Didn't I choose you, the 12? Yet one of you is the devil." He was referring to Judas, Simon Iscariot's son, and the one of the 12, because he was going to betray him. So in chapter 4, when it was talking about the bread of life, it kind of reminded me of John 4 in a way. And it talks about what I wrote in my notes. It says, we aren't satisfied until we know Jesus. And then when it talks about the living water, it kind of reminds me of Matthew 5:6. What storms do you have in your life that you would let him on your boat? I'll let you guys think about that. Anyway, have a good Easter and God bless you and have a great day. Peace out.